here, Rich. So, all right. So, welcome to the Education Fix. Rich, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a Monday morning, and although Mondays to me don't mean as much as they used to mean to me, so everything is good. As
It's
long as
good.
everybody's
Monday
healthy.
morning, we get our Monday morning. We're jumping off on this and starting things up early Monday morning for the West Coast, very early if you're in the U.S. and for the East Coast, not as early, but still morning, right, Rich?
Well, I don't know much about the West Coast, but those time things, but I bet they really enjoy getting up early to see the two of us. I'm sure they do. They set the alarm clock for it.
So Rich, we wanted to launch today. Last week we talked about the different stakeholders and what it means to each of those stakeholder groups, the reopening of schools. And this week we were having some conversations around specifically the thought process was we got into it because Cuomo in New York is now allowing or saying that that schools should open face to face, right? Essentially, so that prompted us to say, like it doesn't if you look at all the statistics and the cases of in children going up, the transmission in children seems like they play a pretty big role in the transmission of COVID. So we're trying to sort of dissect and look at what are the pressures that are pushing people back to school. What are those underlying pressures that are making people, in my view, do things that really aren't in the best interest of the children and their health, and honestly, anybody, the health of us overall as a society. So, what are those pressures that are so insurmountable that we're making what I believe is the wrong decision to bring our kids back at this point? As for some schools, it's next week. So, what are some of those pressures? Some of the ones that we were talking about. I'll give one. You want to give a couple as well. One of them was the need for the parental need, right, and that need to sort of take care of the kids and have a place for them to go. Along with that is that social need. You parents want the socialization. I think selfishly, parents just want their time to not have the kids with them too. So I think there's a little bit of that there as well, where they need their time to do work and to do other things that they need to do. So those are two of the big ones that I've seen, and we have a few other ones too. Rich, you want to dig into a couple other of those real underlying pressures?
Yeah, a phrase just occurred to me as you were speaking, uh, and I'm not sure if it's totally appropriate, but here it comes. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, well said. Yeah,
Just occurred to me. And I'm not sure how accurate it is in all the instances we're going to speak about. I mean, I don't think there's anyone who doesn't want school to reopen in some fashion, shape, or form. It's the ideas that are kind of scattershot rolling around that are causing the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because of my favorite word, and you can guess what the word is, Al, is the failure to future properly for what this is about. And yeah, there's we've already begun to. And we'll talk about it more, I'm sure, in the next few minutes about the parental needs and parental intentions, parental wants for their students and for their own needs, their own parental needs economically, if not other issues as well, in terms of daycare and so forth. So that's clearly the one that pops out real fast and kind of slaps you between the eyes. But there are others. And to come back to Cuomo's decision, Cuomo futured for this in a sense by saying, "Well, I'm not going to open schools unless the infection rate is below 5%." In New York State right now, it's the lowest in the country, has been for a while now, at 0.78%, which is, in quotes, laudable and justifies his decision to reopen schools. And yet there's a big but, a B-U-T, but at the end of that sentence for moms and dads and for children and for the world out there for us to consider. Now, you've already mentioned the daycare piece. I mean, a big piece of what this is about is a daycare. I'm not sure if it's the first piece, but clearly it's a major part of what this conversation needs to be about. It's pretty hard for Mr. Smith to go to work if little Johnny and Mary are home and mom and dad have to work out of the house, which is true for the great majority of the American population. and that ripples out to whether I get a paycheck or not, or that ripples out to whether my own business can open and serve the needs of people out in the community. And consequences, plural, of that have been borderline, if not actual, economic disaster, notwithstanding some encouraging signs there in terms of some issues the last couple of days. So clearly, the economic issue intersects with the daycare issue in as much as what I just discussed.
Yeah, and the economic issue is what you're starting to see companies like Google and others uh, saying work from home for the next year, or work from home. I think I saw two this morning, big companies that said you could work from home forever as long as you want to work from home. And I think that's where the economic piece uh, is unfortunately going to have to be pushed by the business owners, the big corporations. Those are the ones that are really making decisions on whether it's okay to work from home. And if they make that decision, that alleviates a lot of the stress, right? A lot of the pressure. And now, not everybody can work from home, depending on the profession, obviously. But if enough companies say, "Hey, you could work from home," maybe it's one parent that can work from home. Now there are challenges with that too, and if you're working from home and you have young kids to try and take care of, I think there needs to be some investment in helping those parents that are either single parents or two parents at home, both working from home with some of their childcare needs. I think there's got to be that discussion from the top level as well. But the economic piece is a main driver of this overall. Another big driver is the socialization piece, right? Everybody is saying, "Hey, my kids need socialization. They need to get out there. They need to interact with kids. They need to have that face to face time," which is great to talk about that. But the reality of the socialization piece, that's the piece that also causes potentially this to continue to spread as it is, or uh, the flame to be reignited in places like New York because of that need for socialization. So, in my view, uh, we need to, yes, you need to socialize, but there are other ways to socialize, not quite as maybe authentic or engaging, but we need to sort of reinvent this, recreate this. And there are ways to socialize in the online environment different than what we're doing now. There are ways to have social groups that are organized through the school in the online environment. It's not ideal, but we're not talking forever here. We all want to get back, like you said, Rich, right? So why not have that aspect wrapped in? Like we're focusing on, you can't focus on, hey, they need socialization, and then ignore the problem that socialization brings in, right? So there's got to be a solution that works um, synergistically with what's good for us health wise, but also good as far as socialization and these other pieces as well.
Or accept a measure of illness in terms of the socialization piece. That's a hard, harsh thing to say. But I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm not saying you have to agree with me on this, but where some folks are saying, in fact, I think I read it in a few places where say, well, some kids are going to get sick.
Right.
But the trade-off is, we revive the economy.
Right.
Wow. That's a Sophie's choice. Literally,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
Sophie's.
And I have three kids. You have kids and grandkids, Rich. Um, I read one student in Georgia. I don't know if she's suing the state. I think she is because she claimed that the state was using her students as guinea pigs. Now, you may think that's far fetched. You may think that's spot on, but the reality of this is a lot of students, parents, and teachers are have that sentiment. They have this feeling of, hey, it's all great for Cuomo to make a decision. It's all great for the superintendent of districts to make a decision, but they're not the ones that are going to be in the trenches. They're not the ones they're going to contract this. They can stay in their office. They can stay wherever they are and stay safe. So it's easier for them to make decisions, right? So I know I do not want my children being those quote unquote guinea pigs in a school district to really say, hey, people are going to get sick. May as well just go back and
It is what it is.
give it a try. Versus, let's, like we spoke about in other times, yeah, let's look at a real engaging dynamic online solution for not forever. No one wants it forever, but the next 6 months, or dare I say, even the next full school year, that makes it truly engaging with this professional development for teachers, where there's this seamless experience for teachers and students, whether it's face to face or online, where the schooling is actually dynamic and engaging. Like, why can't we look at those solutions, and then with that come up with daycare help for both parents at home? Have employers allow parents to work from home if they can, or at least in certain circumstances where they can't, maybe they have to go in, but maybe there's a way to work part-time from home to help alleviate some of this stuff. There's always, I think it has to come from multiple levels. And a big one, I think, is like we talked about the daycare, and it has to come from these businesses and big corporations like Google saying, hey, work from home, we're good with it. And everything else we could figure out.
Yeah, that might be more amenable. That's the Google solution to certain kinds of professionals. But there are people working in on farms, people on assembly
Yeah.
lines turning out widgets who obviously physically have to be there, and that's the problematic corner of this. Now, there's many elephants in the room. Another elephant in the room is academics, and the question is, and we've talked about this several times already, is to what extent, and I think I know the answer to this, but I don't know it in terms of research based necessarily. How effective has the online instruction been in comparison to face to face?
Right.
And to me, that's a huge elephant in the room.
And that's a Rich, that's a pressure too, right? The pressure of a less than experience in the online space is a very real thing for parents, administrators, teachers, and it's an unknown, but it also is at this point, it is a less than experience because we haven't dedicated enough time to make it an equal or even sometimes better experience in the online space, correct?
Without a doubt. And here comes the word again, Al. Okay, everybody can pronounce it after me. All right, failure to future has resulted in I'll be polite, haphazard levels of adequate to inadequate, and in some senses, I'm sure, uh, superior in experiences from technology. One of my daughters is a second grade teacher. She's going to shoot me for, I'm not going to use her name, but she was yelling at me about the last podcast, saying we missed the socialization piece. But she was also saying that she's talking to teachers who are very happy that they figured out how to do an emoji or do this, that, and the other thing in the lesson. And my daughter, I guess she's more old school than I thought she was. Tell me how that relates to effective instruction. And she said, I don't think that it does, because if people drop back to using technology to be cutesy, it might hold a student's attention for a length of time, but it's not going to be the sustainable necessity to keep the student engaged and effectively learning all the way across the board, which presumes, by the way, that face-to-face they're always engaged and always effectively learning as well. But I mean, we haven't tested for it, and I regret using that word. I can see some people bringing out in a rash by my even using the term, but we haven't tested for what the consequences of achievement insofar as we define very narrowly what achievement may mean, insofar as how our Regents examination may evaluate a student's mastery of things. My money is, this I'd bet the house on, is that it's not as good as what was going on face to face. Likely because teachers know more about how to be effective face to face than they do know how to be effective online in the online environment. And that's not necessarily the teacher's fault, but it's certainly the system's fault for not assuring that we could walk both sides of the street.
Yeah, I do think a good part of this, and maybe a bigger part than we realize is this more about the easiest path, like defaulting to the easiest path, the path of least resistance, and people want to go with what they know. There's resistance to change, as we know. There's resistance to learning something new. And is this a matter of, hey, it's a lot easier for administrators, parents, teachers to just go back to what's normal, even if there is risk. We don't have to learn how to
Yeah,
teach in a new way. We
good
don't
point.
have to. We don't have to adjust what we do throughout the day because our kids are home. We don't like. Is there a big piece of this? It comes down to we just want to go back to how it was, and dig our feet into the sand and say this is it. This is what we need to do because it's the path of least resistance. The reality is it's not. It is. It's like you said. The what did you say? The best intentions is
Road
uh,
to hell.
a road to hell.
Yeah.
So I mean, and we could be witnessing this, and it could just be a human nature thing that we're looking at. A human nature is, listen, we just want to get back to normal. We don't want to have to disrupt our lives. We don't. There's a laziness to it a little bit too, right? But I think mostly people are just overwhelmed and exhausted and just want things to get back to normal. But reality is, it's not safe to get back to normal right now. It's not safe to do this, and it is still always an opportunity to evolve into something better as educators. Because Rich, like you mentioned, you could have an amazing teacher in the classroom. You put them in the online environment, they may struggle for a little bit, but they're going to be amazing in the online environment as time goes by. So it's a skill thing, it's a professional development thing, it's a desire, it's an engagement, it's a discipline thing for educators, administrators, and teachers overall. But it could come down just to human nature as well as another factor that we're just people just don't want to acknowledge that, but that's the cold reality of human intention in society, right?
Very much so. Very much so. And it was something I wanted to say. That's when my fingers were crossed. I forgot what it was. So it'll come to me in the middle of something else. Um,
So Rich,
blank. I'm sorry.
no worries. So we talked about some solutions. You had a nice little chart that you were going to bring up at some point. But some of these groups that we're talking about, there's all these different needs and sort of how they intersect is pretty complex. Uh, I mean, something. Do you want to bring that chart up
Sure.
briefly,
Bring it up.
and just to try to see? This is just a chart that we put together quickly, talking about some of these factors, some of these needs, right? And we probably won't fill it all in now, but just to get an idea of, I think what this really starts to look at is, hey, it's not one thing is not independent of the other. These all intersect, right? And these all interrelate and have exponential effects on one. If you make a decision here, it'll make something in another spot. Now you don't have solutions on the bottom left there, Rich.
That's
That's
right.
fine.
Yeah, it's okay.
So, but just looking at really quick, Rich, you want to just
Yeah.
talk about
This,
what this means? Like, if you're looking at teacher needs through this, what does that mean for each of these areas, kind of thing? And then solutions. We've talked about a few solutions already. But what we'll do, Rich, maybe we'll post this after our conversation. We'll look through some of the things we talked about. And we can post this up in the comment section, and you guys can comment on this or add to it. And
that's a great idea. Was we really do want to invite, we've been getting some nice comments from folks who have been watching our presentations, and this would be a wonderful way for folks to help us figure this piece out. Uh, this is which is called a cross impact matrix, which is a fancy word for a chart, but it sounds much more sexy when you say cross impact matrix. And really what you're looking at is issues and how they intersect, to use Al's word, with other issues in a kind of a correlational approach. And so what will happen is as you begin to think about the futures that emerge from this, is that things that you hadn't thought about suddenly kind of pop up. So let's just try to model a couple. For example, so if we say that there are parental needs that have a part of the reason to either keep students out of school or to send them back to school, somehow that intersects with what teacher needs as well. One thing that occurs to me very quickly is the teachers have to worry about their own health. This is
Hmm.
an issue for them for sure. I've seen that for some union posts on Facebook. That's something that didn't necessarily pop up and hit me in the face when these ideas began to pop up. So parents may want to send their children back to school, and teachers may be perfectly willing to teach their child, those students online, but they have a concern too about their own health deficits and so on. And so there's an impact to think about. When you look at economic, we already, I think, hit this pretty well. Well, it goes right across the board. I'll ask you, I'll do one box for it. How does economic needs intersect with any of these other boxes
So
coming across?
if we go through like parental as an example for this, Rich. So parental and economic, obviously, you can't go out and work if your kids are home. Uh, you need to either have daycare on hand or an au pair or a full-time daycare person, that industry is growing exponentially right now, or you need to have the capacity for at least one of the parents to work from home, which is challenging if you're working from home and you have your kids knocking on the door because they're hungry, or they're fighting in the background or whatever it is, right? So even when you have parents that are home, and you could have two parents that work from home, who's taking care of the kids? If you have one parent working from home and the other parent can take care of the kids, that's obviously perfect. But there as a solution, you need to figure out for parents daycare solutions, even at home if both parents are working at home, and there needs to be some help with that, some financial help with that, some support, some services that are available. And I think from the top down, from the federal government and also the state government, they need to be cognizant of this, that there's a need for this and support it in this time. And that means
Yeah,
with,
you popped out 4 or 5 futures in 2 minutes.
yeah,
That's how this
exactly.
works, folks. That's
Exactly.
how
And
this
then the
works.
social piece, if you shift over to the
Oh, you're on a
social.
roll. Go, Al. Go ahead.
So, and no, I'll toss it back to you. The social piece, I think it was, you said your daughter mentioned this, the social piece. I'm hearing from parents, parents are saying, hey, there's no way if the kids are off for the first 6 weeks like they are here, we need to get them together and socialize. They need to, now, what is that driven from? The parents' need for their own time or actual need for socialization of the kids? It's probably somewhere in between. But because I've heard a number of parents say, "Oh my God, I just need a break." So I think I think that comes into it a little bit, but I think more so people are genuinely concerned. They don't want the isolation to affect their kids, right?
Well, I've seen a couple of great Facebook posts. I wish I could remember them about parents suddenly having a newfound appreciation for what a teacher might do with a child, with 25 kids in a class.
Yes,
That was
exactly.
in a day. I think they've got a new way of looking at life as such. So yeah, there's the parent fatigue is a legitimate future that's has to
Yeah,
be
and
accounted
the
for.
parent, honestly, their capacity, their skill level, their ability to help their students on a daily basis, Rich, that's a big one, right? I mean, the social piece comes in on a number of levels. Do parents, and maybe this is more the academic piece, do parents have the ability, if we're looking at the parent piece, have the ability to uh, actually support their students in the same way that teachers do? Most of the time, no. And we're educators. We're probably a little bit in a different group, not better than anyone else. I'm not saying that, but we have experience teaching. We have experience in education, a lifetime of that, and that makes a difference, right? It's not all parents have that experience. There could be language barriers. There could be technical barriers. There could be just a knowledge barrier where they don't know effective ways to teach. They'll get frustrated. They won't have the answers that an educator would have. And that's a very real concern too. So how do you
Without
support
a
that
doubt.
as well?
I mean, raise your hand. Those of you watching this, raise your hands figuratively, say, tell me how many of you can teach a quadratic equation.
Exactly. It's easy to teach your kid through third or fourth grade. What was it that talks? What was the game show? Are you smarter than the fifth grader or
Yeah,
something?
yeah, yeah,
And a lot of the times we were not smarter than a fifth grader collectively. So just I think Rich, this is a good just barometer or start to this, and maybe we
yeah.
fill more of this in next week. But we would love comments on this. We know it's early in the morning, but hopefully a lot of you will watch this and get to this point and start making comments on who is affected. What are some of those pressures that we're talking about if we haven't added any here, and solutions too? Like, what are some of the solutions that many of which we've discussed throughout this video? What are some of the solutions for this too? So, Rich, we're right about at time. You want to add to this, or final thoughts on this, and final thoughts on the podcast?
Well, I would, again, to come back to what you said, I would, certainly invite people to fill in the blanks. And if the boxes make you crazy, then feel free to just write some comments beneath the chart that Al's going to post up, and we'll use that for the basis of the conversation for next week, because we're obviously thinking about not only the yes buts, the problems and the issues that may not have necessarily uh, uh, been foreseen by the so-called planners, but clearly we're looking for solutions, and we're looking for some ideas here. Um, I think Al's idea from the other day, last week, I should say, uh, was to not come back to school for 6 weeks, at least, not open school face to face, at least for 6 weeks, where administrators would have to uh, invest or create very intense support systems for the teachers to assure themselves that whichever technology they want to use with students is in fact being used effectively and is geared back to what we expect students, whatever grade level they may be, to come back to. We didn't even talk about extracurricular issues, no, well, any of that, and that may come under the social piece to some extent, I suppose. And that's another issue to talk about.
Yeah, and that's a big issue. I think we should dedicate a show to the
Yeah,
extracurricular piece.
maybe so. Yeah, or
Um,
athletics. If my kid was the star quarterback and you wanted him to go to a Division I school on a scholarship, if what is he going to do if there's no place to showcase his talents in a
yeah, and
full league?
Rich, it's not just sports too. Like this is a great topic for next week, but it's also my kids are in robotics, and my older son went to Worlds last year, and that's on his resume. My younger son may not have that opportunity this year or next to do that, and those are legitimate concerns, and that impacts the path of all of our kids to success. And maybe they're not going to be a superstar football player, but it opens them for a partial scholarship, which helps them through life. Or maybe they're not doing as well academically, but man, they're really great in the clubs and the robotics and the all that other extracurricular stuff that'll bring them to the next level. So colleges look at them. Those are the things that are very real impact. So I would love to have a podcast just on the extracurricular piece. That'd be great. And we are going to have guests too. Comment if you want to be a guest, but we are going to have guests as well. So please let us know your thoughts on that, Tim. All right.
Very good.
All right, Rich. As always, it's been a pleasure. We'll see everybody next week, Monday morning, to kick off the week with you. And please let us know your thoughts, comments, and whatnot. All right.
Stay safe.
Thank you, everyone.